It wasn't the rain that stopped her steps. It was the man slumped beside her gate, half conscious and wearing a uniform that didn't belong in her quiet world. The downpour hadn't let up for hours. Water streamed down the windows of Clara's small countryside home, where she lived alone with her 7-year-old son, Jamie. A single mom since the age of 22, Clara had gotten used to silence, routine, and responsibility. Her life was filled with school runs, night shifts at the town clinic, and learning to fix broken pipes or fences when no one else would. But that evening wasn't routine. That evening, she heard something more than just the storm, a low, gruff groan outside the house. Wrapping her shawl around herself, she stepped onto the creaking porch and peered into the gray haze. At first, all she saw was the familiar stretch of muddy gravel leading to the main road. But then, near the wooden gate, was a figure. A man, soaked, slouched, and still breathing, barely. Clara rushed over, heart pounding. As she approached, she recognized the military insignia on his soaked jacket. He was a soldier. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, kneeling beside him. His head lifted slightly, eyes struggling to stay open. "Water? No, not water. The boy," he murmured. Clara's pulse quickened. The boy? What boy? But she didn't waste time asking. With all the strength her small frame could gather, she helped him up and half-carried him into the house. Jamie stood at the door, wide-eyed. "Go get a towel and the first aid kit," Clara told her son firmly. The boy nodded and disappeared. By the time she had the soldier wrapped in a blanket and laid on her old couch, his breathing had evened out, but he was still unconscious. A fresh cut ran down his right temple, and there were deep bruises around his ribs, as if he'd fallen, or worse, been thrown. Clara tended to his wounds, wiping away the blood and mud. He was younger than she'd thought, early 30s maybe, rugged, handsome, despite the grime, and with calloused hands that told stories of survival. Jamie returned quietly and stood near the couch, watching. "Who is he, Mama?" Clara shook her head. "I don't know yet, but someone left him outside in the rain. We couldn't just leave him there." That night the storm raged on, but inside something had shifted. The presence of a stranger, especially one in uniform, brought unease, but also a strange kind of warmth. Clara didn't know what to expect when he woke. What had he meant by the boy? She tucked Jamie into bed and sat in the armchair opposite the soldier, watching him sleep. His face twitched occasionally, as if battling something even in dreams. She had no idea that with this quiet act of kindness, she had just opened a door to a past filled with secrets, to a war she knew nothing about, and to a bond that neither of them saw coming. Sometimes closeness doesn't begin with words. It begins with silence, shared glances, and a cup of coffee held out in a trembling hand. By morning, the storm had passed. Pale golden sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, casting long beams across the floor. Clara stood by the stove, pouring 2 mugs of coffee. Behind her, the house was quiet, except for the soft shuffle of footsteps from the living room. He was awake. Clara turned slowly. The soldier, his jacket now dry and folded on the chair, stood there, still pale but alert. His eyes scanned the room warily before resting on her, full of hesitation. "Morning," she said gently, offering him the mug. "You were in bad shape last night." He accepted the cup with a nod. "Thank you for taking me in." "I'm Clara," she added, "and the boy you mentioned in your sleep, was that someone you were looking for?" The soldier's jaw tensed. He hesitated. "My name's Dean, Sergeant Dean Walker, and no, I wasn't looking for a boy. Not exactly. I think I was remembering something." Something in his eyes flickered. Pain, maybe regret, but he didn't explain further. In the days that followed, Dean stayed. His injuries weren't minor. Fractured ribs, mild concussion, and Clara, being a nurse, insisted he needed a rest. He argued at first, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of relying on someone, but with nowhere else to go and no calls made to any base or family, he gave in. The rhythm of the house changed subtly. Dean, though quiet, began helping where he could, fixing the squeaky front gate, chopping wood, teaching Jamie how to stack kindling and start a small campfire without smoke. Clara watched it all from her kitchen window, heart torn between suspicion and something far softer. One evening, as Jamie fell asleep on the couch during a board game, Clara and Dean found themselves alone on the porch, sipping tea. "You don't talk much," she said with a small smile. Dean stared out at the twilight. "Talking used to get people killed in the places I've been." There was a long pause. Then, almost as if the words had slipped past his guard, he added, "But here, it's quiet. Feels like I can breathe again." Clara didn't press. She just nodded, letting the silence stretch comfortably between them. Over time, the tension between them changed shape, from guarded politeness to quiet understanding. She noticed how his eyes softened when Jamie spoke, or how he waited until she was seated before serving dinner. And Dean, he noticed everything. How she hummed when she cooked, how her laugh, though rare, lit up her whole face, how fiercely she protected her son. One afternoon she caught him staring, not at her, but at a faded photo on the mantelpiece. Her and Jamie. No father in sight. "You never asked," she said quietly. Dean looked over. "I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." Clara felt a warmth in her chest she hadn't known in years. What had started with a knock in the rain was becoming something she couldn't name. Not yet, but she felt it, slow, steady, like roots growing underground before anything blooms. One locked box, one photograph, one name spoken in the dark, and suddenly everything she thought she knew was rewritten. The days rolled into weeks. Dean's bruises faded, his limp disappeared, but something about him remained wounded, something deeper than flesh and bone. Clara didn't push him. She knew what it was like to hold in too much for too long. But the house was old, and old houses have ways of revealing things no one intends to show. It happened one quiet afternoon. Clara had gone to town for groceries, and Jamie was at a friend's house. Dean, alone for the first time in days, wandered into the small attic to look for a wrench he had misplaced. Instead, he found the trunk. It was tucked behind a stack of blankets and dusty photo albums. A dull green Army footlocker with faded letters stenciled on the side. M. Grant. It was locked, but not well. The clasp had rusted over time. With a gentle nudge, it popped open. Inside were letters, medals, a photo of a young man in uniform, Clara's late husband. Dean picked it up and froze. His breath caught. He knew that face. Not personally, but from the records. From a classified mission that went south in a war zone few dared to name. Michael Grant, listed MIA, missing in action, presumed dead. But rumors whispered of a betrayal, a unit ambushed, orders that never made sense. Dean's hands trembled. When Clara returned home, she found him sitting at the kitchen table, the photo in front of him, his face pale. She stopped cold. "Where did you get that?" "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to snoop. I was just—" "Why are you looking at my husband's things?" Dean looked up. There was pain in his eyes. Guilt. "Because I know what happened to him, Clara." The room went still. Clara slowly stepped forward. "What do you mean?" Dean swallowed hard. "I was there. Not that day, but the week after. I was assigned to investigate what happened to his unit. No one ever told the families the full truth. They said it was insurgents, but it wasn't. It was internal." Clara's face crumpled. "You're saying he was betrayed?" Dean nodded. "Orders were scrambled. Intel was bad. And someone on the inside set it up. I've been chasing that trail ever since. That's why I was out there. Why I ended up at your gate." She stared at him, eyes glossy. "So you didn't come here by accident?" Number not entirely. Clara backed away. Everything she had built in her mind, the safety, the trust, was suddenly tangled in secrets she didn't ask for. "I need air," she said, stepping outside. Dean didn't follow. He sat there, the photo still in his hands, knowing that the peace he had started to feel was now shattered. And worse, he might lose the only people who had made him feel human again. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. Clara looked at the sky, tears mixing with raindrops beginning to fall again. She had let someone in, someone with a shadow darker than she'd ever guessed. And yet, her heart didn't want to let him go. Not yet. Love grew quietly between them, but truth thundered louder, forcing her to choose between the man who saved her peace and the ghost of the man she lost. The storm that rolled in that night was nothing compared to the one brewing inside Clara. She stood at the sink, staring at her reflection in the dark window. Behind her, Dean stood motionless, like a man waiting for judgment. Jamie had fallen asleep, unaware of the tension that now split the house like a fault line. "You came here with an agenda," Clara said quietly, not turning around. "You didn't stumble here by chance. You knew who I was, who my husband was." "I didn't plan for any of this," Dean replied, his voice steady but low. "I was following the trail, yes, but I had no idea where it would lead. Until I saw you. Until I stayed." "Okay, you used us," she said, finally facing him. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but fierce. "You let me believe you were just some broken soldier caught in a storm. But the truth is, you were looking for closure on your mission, not mine." Dean stepped forward, hands clenched. "Clara, I didn't come here to hurt you, I swear. But when I realized who you were, I stayed because something changed. You and Jamie, this place, you reminded me what I'd lost, what I never had. It wasn't a lie, it became real." "Real?" She laughed bitterly. "How can I believe anything you say now?" Dean was silent. "And what about Jamie?" she pressed. "He's just a piece of your mission too?" "No," Dean's voice cracked. Jamie's special. He's growing up without answers. He deserves the truth, Clara." "So do you. About what really happened." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Then tell me everything." Dean took a shaky breath. "Your husband's unit was compromised. Someone high up traded coordinates for money. Mike figured it out, and they silenced him. That's what I've been chasing. The men who buried the truth and called it war. One of them is still active. And I think he knows I'm here." The words hit her like a wave. "Are you saying you've put my family in danger?" Dean hesitated. "Yes." She turned away, arms wrapped around herself. "Then you need to leave." Dean's heart sank. "Clara, before Jamie wakes up and sees you gone." He wanted to fight it, to stay, but her tone had the finality of someone who'd built walls too long to let them crumble overnight. Dean slowly walked to the door, pausing with one hand on the knob. "I didn't mean to fall in love with this place," he said. "With him, with you. But I did." And then he left. Clara stood alone in the quiet, her son's soft breathing the only sound left in a house that, just hours ago, had felt like a home again. But now it echoed with what-ifs, in the haunting knowledge that her husband's death had never truly been buried. When the house grows too quiet and the heart too loud, even the strongest begin to wonder, did I push away the one person who could have healed what's been broken for so long? The days after Dean's departure were heavy, thick with the silence of absence. Clara moved through her routines like a ghost, waking Jamie, making breakfast, folding laundry. But everything felt slightly off, as if the air had shifted in the house. Jamie noticed first. "Mama," he asked one morning, "is Mr. Dean coming back?" Clara paused, the buttered toast halfway to her son's plate. "I don't know, honey." "Did he do something wrong?" Jamie pressed, eyes wide with that pure kind of worry only a child carries. Clara knelt beside him. He just had things he needed to take care of." Jamie frowned. "But he said he was going to teach me how to carve a bird from wood. He promised." Clara tried to smile, but her heart twisted. Dean had promised a lot of things. To help, to protect, to be honest. And yet, hadn't he done exactly what he said he would? Given her the truth, protected her, even from himself. That night, Clara sat alone on the porch swing, wrapped in a blanket. A sharp wind carried the first hints of autumn. She looked up at the stars, remembering how Dean used to sit there, silent beside her, finding peace in the quiet. Just two damaged souls letting stillness speak. Had she pushed him away too quickly? She thought back to the expression in his eyes, the guilt, the hurt, the fear of losing something he never meant to find. She had recognized it, because she had felt it too. But wasn't love supposed to be built on trust? Then again, hadn't Dean earned some? He could have lied to her forever, let her live in blissful ignorance. But instead he chose truth, even when it cost him everything. And what had she chosen? Safety, distance, silence. Now sitting in the dark, Clara began to question not Dean, but herself. She reached for the old photo on the table, Michael in uniform, smiling, unaware of the betrayal that would claim his life. Her chest tightened. The grief would never fully go away. But maybe her heart had room for more than just sorrow. Maybe the part of her that closed after Michael died had started to open again, and it scared her. A sudden knock on the door broke her thoughts. She froze. It was late. No one visited this far out at night. She stood, heart pounding, and opened the door slowly. But it wasn't Dean. It was a man in a black coat. No warmth in his eyes, no familiarity in his stance. "Clara Grant?" he asked. "Yes." He handed her a sealed envelope. "You've been named in a classified report tied to your late husband's military service. We'll be in touch." And just like that, he turned and vanished into the dark. Clara clutched the envelope, breath shallow. Something told her Dean hadn't just left to protect her. He was trying to stop something bigger, and it had just arrived at her front door. Hope doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it comes in the form of an old note, a child's drawing, or a familiar shadow standing quietly at the edge of the woods. Clara stared at the envelope all night. She didn't open it, not because she was afraid of the contents, but because of what it might confirm. That Michael hadn't just been lost, he'd been abandoned. And Dean had tried to shield her from that truth. By morning, the house was quieter than usual. Jamie had sensed the tension again. He was drawing alone in the living room when Clara finally came down, the envelope still clutched in her hand. He looked up and said softly, "Did Daddy write to us?" Clara blinked. "What?" Jamie pointed to the envelope. "You looked at it like it was from him." Her heart ached at his innocence. She sat beside him and pulled him close. "No, sweetheart, but it's about him." Jamie didn't ask more. He just nestled against her shoulder, his little hand wrapped around hers. After he fell asleep again for a midday nap, Clara stood alone by the back door, the envelope now opened. Its contents were worse than she imagined. The letter was coded, bureaucratic. But underneath the jargon, it was clear. Michael had discovered something he shouldn't have. His death was no accident, and one of the men responsible had just been promoted to regional commander in the very district Dean had disappeared into. She stood frozen, letter trembling in her hand, when a rustle came from the tree line. Her first thought was panic, but then she saw him, leaning weakly against the fence, blood on his shoulder, his clothes torn. Dean. Clara ran out without thinking, arms catching him just as he stumbled. "You came back," she whispered. "I had to," Dean said, his voice hoarse. They know I told you. I led them away. But I couldn't keep running. Not from this. Not from you." She helped him into the kitchen, laying him gently on the couch. He winced but kept his eyes on her. "You were right to be angry. I should have told you everything from the beginning. But Clara, you deserve to know the truth. And I didn't want to lose the one place that ever felt like home." Clara knelt beside him, her fingers brushing the dried blood on his jacket. "I read the report. Everything." Dean looked down. "Then you know what I'm trying to stop." "Yes," she said. "And you're not doing it alone." His eyes lifted in surprise. "What?" Clara nodded, her jaw set. "Whatever this is, whoever's still hiding behind my husband's death, I'm not running from it anymore. And neither are you." Dean let out a shaky breath. "Clara, this could put you and Jamie in danger." She smiled sadly. "We were already in danger. I just didn't know it yet." For the first time in days, hope flickered between them. Not bright and blazing, but steady, solid. Clara stood and began pulling down the first aid kit from the shelf. "You once said you forgot how to breathe. Then come back to life here with us. We'll figure it out." Dean watched her move with purpose, with strength, with a fire in her he hadn't seen before. And for the first time since he lost his unit, he didn't feel alone. Sometimes the most powerful promises are whispered in quiet rooms, sealed not with rings or flowers, but with sacrifice, truth, and the will to stay when it's easier to run. Dean lay on the old sofa, bandaged and aching, but the pain didn't compare to the weight in his chest, the weight of regret and of something else, something unfamiliar. Clara sat across from him, her fingers lightly gripping a steaming cup of tea. She hadn't said much since stitching his wound, but her silence wasn't cold anymore. It was thoughtful. Finally, she spoke. When Michael died, I thought I'd never trust another man again. Not just because I lost him, but because the army never told me why. Just a folded flag and a letter full of half-truths. Dean looked up, his voice low. You deserved more. I didn't even want revenge, Clara said. I just wanted closure. But now I think closure doesn't come in letters or ceremonies. It comes in knowing the truth and deciding what to do with it. Dean leaned forward, pain flickering across his face. I came here chasing justice, but I found you, and Jamie. And I didn't expect it, Clara. I didn't expect to want to stay. She met his gaze. Her voice was quiet but certain. Then stay. Dean's breath caught. Clara continued, not just in this house. I mean with us. This isn't just about exposing what happened. It's about what comes after. Jamie already looks for you in the mornings. He keeps your drawing in his backpack like a treasure. Dean closed his eyes for a second. That was more than he ever thought he'd deserve again. I made too many promises in my life that I couldn't keep, he said finally. But this one, I'll make and I'll keep it. I won't leave again. Not until this is over. And not unless you send me away. Clara nodded slowly, then reached for something in her pocket. A small locket. This was Michael's, she said. I used to keep it hidden. Felt wrong to wear it when I couldn't let him go. But now, I think I'm ready. She placed it gently in a small wooden box on the mantel and closed the lid. Dean watched in silence, feeling the gravity of the gesture. She turned back to him. I'm not asking you to replace him, just to be here. For Jamie. For whatever comes next. He stood slowly, wincing, and crossed the room to her. Then without a word, he took her hand. I promise, he whispered, whatever comes, we face it together. In that dim-lit room, two broken hearts made a vow not of romance, but of resilience. And outside, as if in quiet agreement, the storm clouds that had hung over their lives for so long finally began to part. Sometimes joy arrives not in grand gestures, but in little moments, when laughter returns to a quiet house and a wounded heart dares to feel light again. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains for the first time in weeks, painting soft gold across the kitchen tiles. Clara stood barefoot, humming faintly as she prepared breakfast, realizing with some surprise that her voice no longer trembled when she sang to herself. Dean sat at the table, his shoulders still sore, but his eyes clearer. Jamie was perched beside him, waving a wooden stick like a sword. I made this for our mission, Jamie announced proudly. You can be Commander Dean, and I'll be Captain Jamie. Dean chuckled. A promotion already? You're moving up fast, Captain. Clara glanced over her shoulder, smiling to herself. For once, the laughter didn't feel borrowed or temporary. It felt like theirs. Later that day, they ventured outside. The air was crisp, the kind that carried promises of change. Jamie chased chickens while Clara and Dean sat on the porch steps, sharing a quiet cup of coffee. I forgot how good this feels, Dean murmured. Just being still. Clara nodded. Sometimes peace is louder than chaos. You just have to listen. Jamie came running, holding something in his hand. Look what I found. It was a tiny bird's nest, carefully cupped in his palms. Inside, a single unbroken egg. We should protect it, Jamie said solemnly, so it's safe until it's ready. Dean looked at Clara, moved by the simple innocence of the moment. He's got your heart, Clara smiled. He's got the best of both of us now. Just then, Jamie pointed at Dean's chest. Mama, can I draw on his sling? Dean laughed. Permission granted, Captain. Jamie grabbed his crayons and began drawing stick figures, one tall, one small, both holding swords and smiling. Underneath, he scribbled, My family. Dean swallowed the lump in his throat. Clara watched quietly. In that simple scrawl was everything they had been missing: belonging. Later, after Jamie had gone to bed, Dean pulled something from his backpack. I picked this up in town before everything. Wasn't sure if I'd ever get the chance to give it to you. He handed Clara a small wrapped box. Inside was a silver bracelet, engraved with two names, Michael and Jamie. But next to them, in smaller letters, one more name had been added: Clara. Clara looked up, startled. I know it's not much, Dean said, but it's the truth. This, this is your story. All of it. The past, the pain, and now, this next chapter. Tears welled in Clara's eyes. Not out of sadness, but something new, something warm. She slipped the bracelet on, then reached over and took Dean's hand in hers. No more running, she whispered. And that night, long after the house had gone quiet, laughter echoed faintly in their dreams, proof that even after war and loss, the heart knows how to find its way back to joy. Absolutely. Here is the next part of the story. Love that endures isn't the love that avoids storms. It's the love that learns how to anchor itself while they rage. Weeks passed. The leaves turned gold and red, blanketing the quiet dirt road that led to Clara's house. On the outside, life seemed still. Warm meals, school runs, evening porch talks. But beneath the calm surface, something darker stirred. Dean's contact in the military, a former intelligence analyst named Marcus Wynn, had gone dark. Their last conversation hinted that more files were surfacing. Documents that not only proved Michael's death had been covered up, but exposed a list of other soldiers tied to illegal missions in remote regions. Missions Dean had once been part of. And now someone wanted to silence everyone connected to them. Clara knew the weight Dean carried. Each night she saw it in his eyes, in the way he listened to distant sounds a second too long, or flinched when headlights passed their home late at night. Still, they kept moving forward. Together. One chilly evening, Dean returned from town with groceries. Jamie ran out to greet him, but Clara noticed Dean's stiff movements, his jaw tight. Something wrong? She asked as he unloaded the car. There was a car, parked across the street from the pharmacy. Same one I saw 3 days ago near Jamie's school. Clara's heart skipped. You think they're watching us? I know they are. They didn't sleep that night. Instead, they made a plan. Clara contacted her lawyer friend in the city. Dean resecured the house, new locks, security cams, and an emergency exit route Jamie could memorize. We're not panicking, Clara said, wrapping Jamie in her arms. We're preparing. That's what families do. Dean looked at her with a mix of pride and worry. You're braver than I ever was. She shook her head. No, Dean, I just have more to lose now. Days turned into a tense rhythm. One evening, Clara came home from the local clinic and found Dean sitting with Jamie by the fireplace, telling stories of constellations, pointing at the sky map on his phone. Jamie was laughing, a real, full laugh. Clara watched from the hallway, tears stinging her eyes. She had spent so long holding everything together alone, never imagining someone would choose to help carry the weight. Now, even as threats loomed and danger circled closer, their little family stood firm. Not because they weren't afraid, but because they had each other, and that made them stronger than fear. The test of time didn't just come through war or loss. It came in patience, in trust, in showing up every single day, even when the world outside was uncertain. And when Dean finally found a way to get Marcus's hard drive, containing the truth about Michael's death, they knew the next storm was about to hit. But this time, they wouldn't face it alone. A new beginning doesn't erase the past. It carries it forward, shaped by pain but guided by hope. The sun was barely up when Clara, Dean, and Jamie pulled onto the highway, the morning mist wrapping around the car like a veil. In the back seat, Jamie hugged his backpack, a worn drawing of the three of them folded into his pocket. Clara glanced at the rearview mirror, catching Dean's reflection. His face was calm, but his hand rested over the compartment where the hard drive was hidden. They weren't running away. They were running toward something now. Toward truth. Toward safety. Toward a life where fear didn't shadow every sunrise. The contact Clara had trusted, a journalist named Layla Cruz, agreed to meet them at a safe house 3 towns over. She was young, sharp, and had exposed enough corruption to know how to navigate a storm when it hit. If the files Dean recovered reached her hands, they would spark a public investigation. And maybe, just maybe, justice. As the car rolled down the hill into the countryside, Clara reached out and squeezed Dean's hand. "You okay?" she asked. "I will be," he replied. "We're doing the right thing." She smiled. "That's all that matters now." Later that evening, after giving Layla the drive and watching her drive off into the dark, Clara and Dean stood under the open sky. Jamie was asleep in the next room. "I never thought I'd start over again," Dean said quietly. "Not after everything I lost." Clara leaned against him. "We don't start over because we forget. We start over because we remember, because we know what it means to lose." Dean looked down at her, eyes full of something she hadn't seen before. Not pain, not guilt. Peace. "I want to build something with you," he said. "Not in hiding, not in fear, just a life. Simple. Safe." Clara laughed softly. "You and me? Simple?" He grinned. "Okay, maybe not simple, but real." She nodded slowly. "Then let's build it. One day at a time." That night, as the wind brushed the curtains and the house settled into silence, Clara reached into the old wooden box where Michael's locket had once been. This time she placed something new inside. A photo of her, Jamie, and Dean on the porch steps. Sunlight in their eyes. A memory, a promise, a new beginning. And somewhere out there the truth was already spreading, the spark already catching fire. No matter what tomorrow brought, they had each other, and that was enough. Real love isn't proven in comfort. It's revealed when everything is at stake, and you choose someone else's safety over your own soul. It happened fast. Layla's expose was more powerful than expected. The files Dean gave her exposed an entire covert unit and detailed the real reason Michael was sent to die. He had refused to carry out an unethical order. The fallout was explosive. Media outlets picked up the story. A congressional hearing was launched. Names were named, and Dean's was one of them. The government couldn't deny the truth anymore, but it also couldn't afford to let the world know who had leaked it. So they came for him. It was supposed to be a normal morning. Clara had packed Jamie's lunch for school. Dean was helping him tie his shoes. Then a black SUV pulled up down the road. Dean saw it through the window, and he knew. "Clara," he said, his voice too calm, "take Jamie into the basement, now." Her heart jumped. What's going on?" "They're here for me. They won't risk hurting you two if I go out alone." Clara grabbed his arm. "You can't. Dean, no, after everything, after we just—" He turned, cupped her face in his hands. "I promised I wouldn't run, and I meant it. But I will protect you, you and Jamie. That's all I care about now." Jamie stood frozen, sensing something was wrong. "Are they bad people?" he asked quietly. Dean kneeled. Just scared people trying to cover their mistakes. "But it's okay. You're safe. Mommy's got you." Jamie nodded, blinking back tears. Clara's eyes burned as she whispered, "You won't come back, will you?" Dean swallowed hard. "Not right away, but maybe one day, when the truth is louder than fear." He kissed Jamie's forehead, then Clara, and then he walked out into the morning mist. When the agents surrounded him, Dean raised his hands peacefully. No resistance, no violence. He was arrested under classified charges and taken away, but he left something behind, a letter, folded and tucked under Jamie's pillow. "To my captain, you are the bravest boy I've ever met. Always protect your mom. She's the real hero. Love, Commander Dean." Back in the house, Clara held Jamie tight, both of them watching the road long after the black SUV vanished. Dean had fulfilled his promise, and in doing so, gave them a future. His sacrifice was not the end. It was the beginning of a legacy. Closure isn't silence. It's a song composed of grief, love, and the courage to carry forward what someone left behind. A full year passed. The house on the hill remained the same. Weathered porch, wind chimes swaying gently, Jamie's drawings still taped to the refrigerator. But inside, everything had changed. Clara now ran a small clinic nearby. The town knew her as the woman who stood tall when the government tried to hide the truth. A few called her a hero. She never believed them. The real hero was gone, or so she thought. Then one autumn evening, as golden leaves swirled down the road, she received a call. Unknown number. Washington area code. It was Layla Cruz. They released him, Layla whispered. Quietly. No charges, no press. But he's free. Clara dropped the phone. Jamie found her sitting on the porch steps, tears streaming silently. Mom? He asked, worried. She turned, smiled through the tears, and said the words she'd waited over a year to say. He's coming home. 3 days later, a dusty gray pickup pulled up the gravel drive. Jamie ran before Dean could even open the door. The soldier who stepped out wasn't the same man who had disappeared. His beard a little longer, his posture a little slower. But his eyes still searched for them the same way. Clara followed Jamie, walking slowly, as if afraid the dream would dissolve. Dean dropped to one knee, arms open. Jamie crashed into him, wrapping his little arms around his neck. Clara stopped a few feet away. I thought I'd lost you. Dean stood. I promised I'd come back when it was safe. She laughed through her tears. You always keep your promises. This time, there were no more words needed, only hands finding hands, hearts remembering the rhythm they once shared. That night, as the fire crackled and Jamie slept soundly with Dean's old jacket tucked around him, Clara and Dean sat by the window. Do you regret it? She asked. Dean shook his head. Every sacrifice led me back to this moment. I'd do it all again. She laid her head on his shoulder. Then let's not waste another minute. Outside, the wind danced through the trees. No sirens, no shadows, only stillness, only peace. And in that harmony of justice earned, love returned, and family restored, a new song began. One composed not of tragedy, but of hope, forever.